Misty paid full price for her bike. Starting off with a fun headcanon, if you've played the Gen 1 Pokemon games, you'd know that the bike shop in Cerulean City sells bikes at the ridiculous price of 1 million Pokédollars. In the games, you're able to get a bike through an alternative method by using a bike voucher. However, if you're anybody else, you've got to cough up the cash. This was presumably the case with Misty. As the gym leader of Cerulean City, she would have gotten her bike from the store, willingly paying full price to support local businesses. However, one day Ash comes along and steals her bike, which Pikachu later destroys. It's because of this that she initially decides to travel across the whole region with Ash, uprooting her old life. It's because she needs that money back from him, and wouldn't leave him till he pays back the amount in full. At least that was her reason starting off. Later on, it was because she became his genuine friend. Phoebe is from Alola. Pretty straightforward theory. Phoebe, as someone who has brown skin and is wearing a tropical dress with flower motifs, definitely seems like she could be from a tropical island region like Alola, instead of the Japanese Hoenn. However, we also know that her grandparents live in Hoenn, which makes the likelihood that Phoebe is an immigrant from Alola slim. And there doesn't seem to be any evidence in any Pokemon media for this theory, beyond just her visual design. So she's either just really passionate about her distant Alolan heritage, or is just appropriating Alolan culture. Take your pick. Ariana is Silver's mother. It is canon that the father of the Gen 2 rival Silver is the Team Rocket boss Giovanni, but who is his mother? Well, unlike other parental speculation theories in Pokemon, this one has a singular, straightforward answer: Ariana. Of course, as a high-ranking female rocket executive who would have been closely working with Giovanni around a decade before the Gen 2 games, she's kind of the only plausible candidate. However, what makes this theory go from just circumstantial to likely is Ariana's redesign in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. They explicitly gave her the same red-shaded hair as Silver, and even gave her a similar hairstyle, at least on the back of their heads. This was an intentional design choice by Game Freak to make her more similar to Silver, and it's likely that they made this design decision around the same time they decided that Giovanni was Silver's dad. Guzma was abused. We've got a pretty sad theory now. If you visit a house on Route 2 and talk to the NPCs inside the house, you find out that this is actually Guzma's childhood home. Peeking around, you start to notice details that hint at a distressing story. First of all, if you talk to his father, he just straight up says, "I tried to set that boy of mine straight, but when I did, I was the one who got beat," already establishing the type of household they were. He also said that Guzma ran away without even telling his parents. Additionally, if you interact with a golf bag in the corner, it says that the bag is filled with broken and bent golf clubs, implying that they were in that state because somebody used them to beat someone. If you go into Guzma's former room, you see that he has a bunch of trophies on display, but only bronze and silver, not any gold. So with that, we can put together a story of what happened. When Guzma was a kid, these three were a family together. His parents pushed him to achieve, even at the cost of his own well-being. Guzma tried to do well, as evidenced by the bronze and silver trophies he won, but this still wasn't good enough for them. They got mad at what they saw as his failures and would verbally berate him for not being good enough, and maybe even got physical by beating him. This came to a head when Guzma was chosen for the Island Challenge but failed to complete it, which angered his parents even further. Guzma's parents continued pressuring him, but Guzma, now a teenager, started to fight back. Of course, this resulted in the aforementioned altercation, where Guzma beat his dad back. Of course, sometime after this, he ran away to escape his toxic home situation and founded Team Skull for other misfits and outcasts like him, albeit to do crime with. If we look at Guzma himself, aspects of his character do fit with this backstory. After you beat him in Po Town, he starts violently scrubbing his head and yells, "Guzma, what is wrong with you?" meaning that he likely internalized the stuff his parents said about him after his failures. Additionally, Plumeria says that Guzma is so loyal to Luzamine because she was the only adult who saw his strength, obviously fitting for someone who so desperately wanted parental approval, but never got it. Finally, Guzma's ace Pokemon is a Golisopod, which evolves from a Wimpod. The evolution from small, meek, cowardly Wimpod to the big, strong, hulking, and mean Golisopod would match Guzma's growth as a character. Additionally, Golisopod's signature ability is Emergency Exit, where it leaves the battle after it has taken enough damage, which is basically what Guzma did as a child too. Hilbert has a shiny Zekrom. In episode 15 of Pokemon Generations titled The King Returns, depicting a story event from Black and White 2, the male protagonist of Black and White, Hilbert, makes a brief cameo at the end. Interestingly, the Zekrom he's riding on has blue eyes, which is weird because Zekrom has red eyes. However, a shiny Zekrom has blue eyes, which exactly match the Zekrom he has. So this isn't even a theory in my opinion, it's just a straight up fact that we can verify with our own eyes. However, since Generations is supposed to be in line with the games, I wonder how he got his hands on one. Zekrom was shiny locked in the original Black and White. Mount Silver NPCs are champions. In the Generation 2 games, access to Mount Silver is blocked behind having all 16 Kanto and Johto badges, as well as beating the Indigo League. This is because Mount Silver is home to extremely powerful and dangerous Pokemon. Inside Mount Silver and the nearby Route 28, there are only 4 people other than the trainer. Nurse Joy in a Poke Center, an old lady in the Poke Center, a girl alone in a house, and Red. Obviously, we know that Red himself is a former champion. Nurse Joy is probably there for her job, though I guess she could have been a former champion before becoming a nurse, who knows. The old lady in the center tells you that trainers who seek power climb Mount Silver despite its many dangers with their trusted Pokemon, and that they must feel as if they can go anywhere. Of course, she could just be a generic NPC info dumping, but she could have also been a champion level trainer in her younger days, speaking from experience. The final NPC is in a hidden house. Once you speak to her, she asks you to not to tell anyone about her, and gives you a TM. She says that it's hard being a celebrity because everywhere she goes, people follow her around, and that she just wants to be left alone. So if this woman is a celebrity who is currently holed up in an area only champions can access, we can put 2 and 2 together and assume that she was once a champion herself, and got tired of the fame that came with the position. She's also the same girl that gives you the TM Fly in the Gen 1 games, and even then she was just trying to be left alone. So in the timeline, she's probably a Kanto champion before Blue. Kira meets humans. An old legend shared in Lakinosa town says that a monster would sometimes come to the town, bringing cold winds with it, and that it would hunt for people and Pokemon to eat. Because of this, the people of the town built a wall to prevent the monster from coming back, and they also didn't venture outside the wall at night. Now, we know that this monster is Kyurem. However, the people of the town say that they don't believe in the monster anymore, meaning that Kyurem didn't attack in a long time. So did Kyurem actually attack and eat people in the past, or did somebody back then just know about Kyurem and make up a tale about how it ate people to scare little kids? Unless the walls were created before the legend and was just adopted into the story, the fact that they exist and the people of Lakinosa still fear the dark probably means that Kyurem did at one point kill and eat people, though it likely gave up hunting sometime in the past. I mean, later in the game, we see it attempt to kill the player at the Order of Gestas, so we do know it's capable of killing humans. Missing brother is Sandygast. In a house in Iki Town, you can find a woman who talks about her older brother who disappeared a long time ago. She mentioned that he would work hard to collect sand on a beach when he was young. Elsewhere on the map, you can find a message in a bottle from this older brother, who says to deliver it to his younger sister who lives in Iki Town. He says that he lives in a weird place now, but the people are all kind to him and he is okay. If he delivered this to the woman in Iki Town, she is relieved that he's doing okay even though he's still technically missing, and as a reward for giving her the message, you get a Stardust. While this could be the end of it, there are a couple theories as to who this brother is. The initial entry on this iceberg suggested that it was the old man in Haina Desert, and while he is mysterious and ripe for conspiracies, I don't really think that he fits this specific mystery. However, in my research, I found another better candidate for the missing brother. Near Route 16, you can talk to a boy who asks you to see the sandcastle he made. It turns out that it's a Sandygast who attacks you. After defeating the Sandygast, the boy says, "Oh, I thought I could make you get sand for me too. Oh well, there's plenty of other prey here on the beach." The kid then disappears, leaving just the Stardust behind. Now, the fact that the boy wanted us to get sand for him matches up with the missing brother's description, as the brother also wanted to collect sand. Also, just like his sister giving you Stardust, the kid also leaves behind Stardust. We know that Sandygast attack children, and that Sandygast are born when dead souls inhabit mounds of sand. So here's what happened. One day, the kid was collecting sand on the beach near Route 16, as he likes to do. However, he ends up dying. Whether if it was an accident like drowning, or if he was killed by another Sandygast, we don't know. However, the kid's soul, now bound to the beach, eventually inhabits a mound of sand and becomes a sandy ghast, and he can now collect sand for eternity. However, sandy ghasts also have the ability to possess living humans, so sometimes the kid's soul manifests itself in its human ghost form to lure in people, and then attacks them to hopefully try and possess them to collect sand for him. However, still remembering his beloved sister, he did somehow use his ghost magic to write a letter to her, saying that he's okay but can't see her again, but unable to deliver it to her directly since he's bound to the beach. He puts it in a bottle and throws it into the ocean, hoping the currents deliver it to Mele Mele Island where his sister is. Now the only issue is the contents of the letter here. He says that he's in a wonderful new world with kind beings, and unless the ghost realm is that much different from the mortal realm, the description doesn't really match the ordinary beach he's supposedly stuck on. Maybe he didn't want to tell his sister that he's now a ghost stuck on a beach, so he just made up a story to make her feel better. What do you think of this theory? Lantern can destroy the universe. So I already alluded to this in my previous entry about ridiculous Pokédex entries. Lantern's Pokédex entry from Gold says that the light it emits is so bright that it can illuminate the sea surface from a depth of 3 miles. So this claim is utterly ridiculous because water is very good at absorbing light. To be able to illuminate the surface from 3 miles underwater would require a light that emits a ridiculous amount of energy. According to a Reddit post by user I want to link, who did a calculation of the physics required for this claim to be true, the amount of power Lantern would need to do this is 10 to the power of 105 watts. To put that into perspective, that's about the equivalent of the total energy output of 10 to the power of 50 universes. So yeah, if we take this calculation at face value, Lantern does possess the energy output to easily destroy the entire universe. However, there are other threads where people debate if this is the case. Basically, the calculations make a lot of assumptions that may not be completely accurate or constant, and it's entirely possible for the power output to, in reality, be many magnitudes less than what that initial ridiculous number claimed it to be. However, the amount of energy is still comedically high for one fish to produce. Even at the lowest end of the calculations, it's still enough power to power hundreds of thousands of homes. So yeah, if we have any actual physicists watching this video who can give an informed explanation, please feel free to give us your perspective in the comments. I suck at physics, so don't look at me. Ash is physically strong. Throughout the anime, Ash has shown oh man, say that 10 times fast. Ash has shown several feats of incredible strength, possibly the greatest being him picking up Cosmoem, which has a weight of over 2,000 pounds, like it's absolutely nothing. And for you guys saying that this doesn't count since Cosmoem can levitate and it's possible that it just levitated while his hands were under it, Ash has also been recorded picking up and throwing a giant log several meters, which is also an insane feat of strength. So yeah, I guess Ash just has been hitting more than one type of gym. Unknown blob Pokemon. This entry is referring to the Pokemon whose true bodies are hidden, such as Tangela and Shellder. They both obviously have true bodies obscured in shadows by the vines and shell respectively, and we never really see what they look like out of it. Are they just black blobs underneath, or do they have more interesting designs? Not all dragons are dragon type. This has been a raging question in the Pokemon community since the 90s. Why aren't some Pokemon who are obviously physically dragons, like Charizard or Gyarados, not the dragon type? Recently, Lance gave us an answer in Pokemon Masters. When wearing a Gyarados related outfit, he says, "This outfit shows off Gyarados' power as a dragon." What's that, you say? Gyarados isn't a dragon type Pokemon? Haha, not all dragons are dragon type Pokemon. This makes sense. We've established before that the Pokemon types are likely designated based on the energy the Pokemon has rather than the actual physical animal the Pokemon is, if that makes sense to you. You should remember the whole theory about it, about Pokemon being energy creatures, how moves are manifestations of energy, and this is why terrestrialization even works. But yeah, it seems like in the Pokemon world there are two different classifications of dragons. Physical dragons, which are just a Pokemon that physically look like dragons, and dragon types, which are the Pokemon with dragon energy. Some Pokemon, like Dragonite, fit both categories. However, some Pokemon, like Alolan Executor, are dragon type despite being a palm tree. Though personally I think the body type fits a dragon, albeit not a traditional one, but I just used it because it's the go-to example of dragon types that aren't dragons within the community. And the other way around, physical dragons that aren't dragon type, like Charizard. I think this is a perfectly fine explanation, both in-universe and out-of-universe. It would be limiting for Game Freak if every single dragon design had to be dragon type, like how I also think it would be limiting if every physical bug had to be bug type. Like Drapion, despite being a bug physically, benefits a lot from being dark poison type instead. Also, we've got Flygon, who despite being physically a bug, is a ground dragon type. Erica was a ghost type leader. It is theorized that Erica was initially meant to be a ghost type gym leader. This is based on early leaks and concept arts of the Gen 1 games. In Erica's concept art, she wears her kimono with the right side over the left, which traditionally in Japan is the way you dress a corpse for a funeral. If you are living, you are supposed to wear your kimono with the left side over the right, which is how she wore it in the final iteration of the Gen 1 games, and it has been kept like that since then. Additionally, Erica was initially meant to be the 5th gym leader, and Lavender Town was initially designed as the 5th city, meaning that it's feasible that she was originally meant to be the gym leader of Lavender Town, further cementing the ghost type connection. Finally, Agatha, who is the ghost type Elite 4 members, was not a ghost type specialist in the initial version of the game, instead using a team of a bunch of varied types. So there's no overlap in trainer specialty in that initial version of the game. This theory is likely true. I do believe Erica was initially meant to be a ghost type gym leader. Also, before we get to the next entry, if you guys are liking this video and you want to see me make more Pokemon content, head over to my second channel called Rive Extra. There I upload shorter, more casual content, and right now if you go there, there should be a video of me talking about the 10 Pokemon I think should get Mega Evolutions in Pokemon Legends ZA. So if you'd go there, check out that video, maybe even subscribe to that channel, that would be great. Thank you. Clan leaders wear the creation orbs. I thought this was a pretty obvious one until I got into a debate with my roommate last year on whether this was actually the case. Basically, Dialga and Palkia have the Adamant and Lustrous orbs respectively, which initially would just power up their stat moves. In Legends Arceus, they are renamed to the Adamant Crystal and Lustrous Globe, and now they have the ability to change Dialga and Palkia into their origin forms. You get them from Adamant and Irida respectively, and this makes sense. The clan leaders have some obvious connections to Dialga and Palkia, so it makes sense that the creation orbs would be a sort of family heirloom. However, this theory states that they're actually wearing it on those chokers they're wearing on their necks, and honestly, I believe it. The Adamant orb is a bluish, cut, angular gem, while the Lustrous orb is a polished pink spherical gem. And while not exactly the same, it's close enough. The fact that the chokers aren't just a one-off design gimmick for the character, but something that both clan leaders share, show that it's something important for the clan leaders, which matches the orbs. The only thing is that they still wear it after giving these items to the players, but that could just be Game Freak not wanting to make a second model for these characters without those chokers. Trainer School Ghost. In the Gen 7 games, if you go to the trainer school at night, you can talk to a little girl in her Drifloon who tells you about scary mysteries that happen at night on school grounds. If you investigate these mysteries, you find out that most of them aren't scary and have reasonable explanations, or are just Pokemon playing silly pranks. One of the mysteries involves laughter coming from a classroom. When you go to investigate it, you find a classroom seemingly filled with students and a teacher, which is strange because it's nighttime. If you talk to the teacher starts speaking strangely, saying, "I, Drifloon, child, lonely." Afterwards, the teacher suddenly transforms into a Hypno, and the students in the class disappear. It was all an illusion created by Hypno. Keep this in mind for later. After you solve 6 of the ghost stories, you ask the girl for number 7. She says she doesn't know, but suddenly congratulates you for solving all 7 mysteries, strangely. She gives you wise glasses as a reward, and thanks you for debunking the ghost claims and dispelling the fear. She says that she came from far away and doesn't speak the language well, but she likes the school and wants to protect it and its students. The school security guard then yells at you for being on the school grounds this late at night. The girl and her Drifloon suddenly disappear, and when you try to explain to the guard what you were doing, he says that the 7 mysteries were a popular urban legend. But we couldn't have been talking to anybody right now because we were supposedly alone. So it turns out the little girl is mystery number 7. Let's solve this mystery then. On the island, there's another student who tells you that there was a kid some time ago at the school who got kidnapped by a driftloon, and that there's a diary from one of their classmates about the event somewhere in the trainer's school. The diary talks about a new girl who started to attend the school, and every day she would be picked up by a hypno to go home. However, one day a driftloon picked her up instead of the usual hypno. The notebook entry stopped then, since the following pages are too damaged to read. However, Driftloon's infamous Pokédex entry says that the species is known for carrying children to the afterlife, so we can imply that the new girl was killed by the Driftloon who picked it up that one day. The hypno, now lonely that it lost its friend, goes to the school at night and conjures up a classroom full of students to not be lonely anymore. In fact, one of the girls in the classroom has the same model and speaks in the same broken English as the girl outside the school. These two girls are the same, Hypno's friend. And when we talk to Hypno, it tries to explain what happened. The words Driftloon, child, and lonely are spoken. It was trying to tell us that Driftloon took the child it was friends with, and now it's lonely, so it's making this illusion. So we've pieced together this story. A little girl who was friends with a Hypno one day got kidnapped and killed by a Driftloon. Her ghost would later quote-unquote haunt the school because she cared about her friends there. She asks you to solve the 6 mysteries to make it so that her friends at the school won't be scared anymore. However, she doesn't know what the 7th mystery is, because she herself is the 7th mystery, her disappearance. And with that, we have solved mystery number 7. Movie Fuji and Game Fuji are the same. In Pokemon, there are 2 Fujis in Generation 1, albeit across different media forms. The first movie features a character called Dr. Fuji. Dr. Fuji is a scientist who, distraught by the death of his daughter, tries to bring her back by studying cloning technology. He eventually gets funded by Team Rocket, though in exchange he has to clone Mew for them. He agreed and eventually created Mewtwo. Of course, Mewtwo escaped and killed all the scientists who created it, presumably including Dr. Fuji. In the Gen 1 games, there is another character called Mr. Fuji, who is an old man that takes care of orphan Pokemon in Lavender Town. He is also kidnapped by Team Rocket after he finds that they killed Marowak, and went to go confront them. When the player saves him, he gives you the Pokeflute. Obviously, eyebrows would be raised considering that these 2 characters have the same name, but in later games, the theory that they're the same person is confirmed. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, Blaine, a scientist, says that he used to work with Mr. Fuji. They presumably work together on Cinnabar Island in the Cinnabar Mansion, where he can find leftover material from the research team that created Mewtwo. In fact, in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, Blaine specifically says this. If you want additional evidence, in Pokemon Emerald on Faraway Island, where you find Mew, there's a note wishing that only a kind-hearted person set foot on the island again, and it's heavily implied that it's written by Dr. Fuji. And if we take this anime story and game story and combine them, the narrative flows perfectly. Fuji's daughter dies, he tries to recreate her through cloning, Team Rocket funds his work in exchange for him creating Mewtwo, but Fuji starts to doubt the morality of his endeavors after seeing the pain Mew goes through. Of course, the final straw is the treatment of Mewtwo, Mewtwo's escape, and the death of his colleagues. After this, he retires to Lavender Town and does good by taking care of orphan Pokemon. It helps him deal with the loss of his daughter by taking care of children who need a parent, and also basically helps him cope with his guilt of mistreating Pokemon in his cloning experiments. And he's able to find Mew and hide it on Faraway Island, hoping that only pure-hearted people find it in the future, knowing the pain it went through. This theory is confirmed. I mean, Bulbapedia already treats them both as the same person. Crystal Pokemon are terrestrial. Crystal Pokemon are a type of Pokemon released in the TCG in 2002. The Pokemon look similar to their normal counterparts, though with a slight crystalline shine around them. However, what makes them special is that they are a type that isn't their normal type, and also use moves that aren't normally the types that they use. While this was an interesting gimmick for the time, one has to notice the similarities to terrestrialization, introduced in the main series games 20 years later. I mean, crystal Pokemon that change their type from what they usually are? Too similar to be coincidence. I think terrestrialization was directly inspired by the TCG crystal Pokemon. Zorua researcher is Ingo. In a trailer for Legends Arceus, we follow a researcher documenting the wildlife in the Alabaster Icelands. He says that he's recording on a strange device, implying that it's the Arc phone. However, the character sounds like an adult, meaning that it's not the protagonist. However, looking at the voice actor, we find an answer for who this mystery researcher is. The voice actor is the same as Pokemon Master's VA for Ingo. And of course, Ingo is present in Legends Arceus, furthermore as a faller who would presumably also have an Arc phone of his own, assuming that he too was sent by Arceus, which is why he was able to record. And maybe he didn't have one later when we meet him, because he lost it when being attacked by the Zorua and Zoroark in the events of this trailer.
It's currently 7:07 p.m. I'm hoping to document some wild Pokemon using this strange device.
Pleasure to meet you. Now then, all aboard! Please, accept this small token. I've procured a special gift for you. Don't let it go to waste.
Item balls are abandoned Pokemon, more of a purposefully edgy headcanon and not meant to be taken seriously, but this is the idea that item balls, or Pokeballs that you find on the ground across the world, are the remains of abandoned Pokemon. The idea is that trainers abandon their Pokemon in their balls in the wild. Unfortunately, over time, the Pokemon stuck in their balls with no food or water die and decompose, and the only things remaining in the balls are the items that the Pokemon held before dying, which is what we pick up. Ultimately, there's a lot of reaching here, and a lot of issues with this theory that make it unbelievable in universe, but it's ultimately just supposed to be an interesting idea thrown out there for fun, rather than something meant to be taken seriously. Applin's body. If you didn't know, the apple part of Applin is not actually part of the Pokemon itself, rather Applin is a small worm that wears an apple like a shell. You can actually see the true body of Applin in a new Pokemon Snap game. The pun behind Applin's design is that it's a worm in an apple, but worm spelled with W-Y-R-M, referring to a dragon with a long body with no or little limbs, which is why Applin is a dragon type. Episode 244 Legendary is Mega Gyarados. In episode 244 of the anime, which aired in 2002, Misty has a daydream about how she was chasing a legendary Pokemon. Quote-unquote legendary Pokemon does not bear resemblance to any legendary Pokemon in the game, even to this day. However, that large fin does resemble Mega Gyarados. Well, not exactly, because Mega Gyarados has two of those back fins, while this legendary Pokemon only has one, but it's the closest thing that we've got. While Mega Gyarados is not a legendary by classification, it could be described as legendary in the literal definition of the word. And interestingly, Misty does use a Mega Gyarados much later in the anime. Considering the timeline of the anime is continuous, we can assume that Misty and the other characters kind of always knew Megas existed, they just didn't talk about them in the earlier seasons. So maybe Misty knew about Mega Gyarados and wanted one for herself, but was unable to get the Mega Stones. This is why she dreamed herself literally chasing after it, representing her subconscious desire to get a Mega Gyarados. And years later, she finally quote-unquote caught that legendary Mega Gyarados. Toxtricity in Alola. In the Gen 7 games, if you go to the Game Freak office building, you can see a blurry poster on the wall. While it wouldn't have meant anything at the time of the game's release, a few years later the pieces would fall together. This poster is depicting Gigantamax Toxtricity. Several features line up: the primary color, the glowing yellow eyes and yellow electricity mohawk, the two pink antennas sticking out at an angle. You can even see it sticking out its tongue. It's definitely feasible that Toxtricity was designed very early on in the development of Sword and Shield, before the Gen 7 games even released, so teasing its design in the Gen 7 games would be possible. In universe, it's likely that somebody at the office was just a fan of the Galar Gym League and got a poster of a Gmax Toxtricity. However, there is one issue with this theory, and it comes directly from the designer of Toxtricity himself, Yusuke Kozuke. He actually responded to a tweet saying that this poster was a tease for Toxtricity, saying that it was actually unrelated, and the poster instead depicted 3 people. And you know, maybe this could be the case. There's no reason for him to lie about this. However, if the poster was in fact of something unrelated entirely, it has to be one of the biggest coincidences ever. To me, the top half of the poster still bears a striking resemblance to Gmax Toxtricity. Looker's Croagunk. In Pokemon Platinum, Looker has a Croagunk which he uses to help him with making arrests. However, in subsequent games, Croagunk does not appear. In X and Y, the game says that one of Looker's Pokemon was killed, and while it doesn't give us a name, Looker keeps a photograph of himself and a bluish-purple Pokemon, which happens to match Croagunk's description. We don't really know how his Krogan died. Looker's timeline is super weird considering that he is a Faller. It's entirely possible that there are two Lookers in the Mega timeline, the Faller one and the one native to the timeline. But considering that it doesn't appear in black and white alongside Looker, I think it died possibly before the events of Gen 5. Honestly, I don't know, he's been missing from the main series for like 7 years at this point, so hopefully he makes a return in Gen 10 or even Legend Z8. Shard Origins. In many games starting with Gen 3, you can find shards, colored ancient artifacts that certain collectors really like, exchanging valuable items or services in exchange for them. But what are shards exactly? There are 4 types of shards, red, blue, green, and yellow, which is an obvious nod to the Gen 1 games. However, what exactly are they? Well, while no definitive answer is given, a popular theory is that the shards are broken fragments of Arceus' plates. Specifically, the shards seem to be broken versions of the Zap Plate, Meadow Plate, Flame Plate, and Splash Plate. And there's nothing that disproves this. We know that multiple copies of the plates can exist within the lore. In fact, in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, you can theoretically find as many plates as you want to in the Grand Underground. However, the lore question that needs to be asked is, why do only those 4 specific plates become shards? Why don't we ever see a shard based on the Insect Plate, for example? The only answer that I can think of is that those 4 plates specifically are more brittle, so they break to become shards easier, while the other plates are stronger and never break. The real question, though, is what is the origins of the mysterious shards? They don't look like any of the Arceus plates. In fact, they don't look like anything else in the game at all. Gardevoir Fairy Wind. In a trailer for Pokemon X and Y, Gardevoir can be seen using the move Fairy Wind. However, in the final release of the game, Gardevoir can't learn the move. In fact, its line doesn't get the move at all, even in the latest releases of the games. Now, there's a reasonable explanation for this. The Gardevoir trailer was just to show off the new Fairy type coming to Gen 6, so they showed a Fairy type Pokemon using a Fairy type move. Maybe at that point in development, Fairy Wind was the only Fairy type move that had a complete animation, so they made Gardevoir use it instead of a move it knew in the final game. The question is, however, why did they remove Fairy Wind from Gardevoir at all? The move is perfectly fine to give to Gardevoir or its pre-evolutions. Why would they not give it to the line, especially if they showed it off in the trailer? I guess it's just one of those baffling Game Freak decisions. Gestus' true name. Just like how N's true name is Naturae Harmonia Gropius, Gestus also has a true name, Jesus Harmonia Gropius. Now we know that Harmonia is the name of the king of Unova the two of them are descendants of, and Gropius could just be a surname. However, the first name Jesus, spelled G-CIS, is interesting. According to Bulbapedia, this is a reference to the musical notes G and C sharp, which are the pitches of the notes that timpani play in Gestus' battle theme. In music theory, the combination of these notes forms what is called a tritone. Tritones are also called the devil's tone due to their unsettling and creepy sound, so that's probably the meaning behind this name. But I can't help but wonder about the pronunciation of this true name. Jesus sounds exactly the same as Jesus, as in Jesus Christ. And I can't help but wonder if this connects to the story. Like, Gestus does try to portray himself initially as a savior of sorts, someone who will liberate Pokemon and bring equality, which is a pretty Jesus-like thing to do. However, if you look deeper, he's got bad motives, stirring up this liberation movement as a ruse to seize power for himself. He's got evil underneath. So like his character, his name seems righteous on the surface, but if you actually dig deeper, you find that it's actually devilish. What do you think? Pokemon Adventures is rushed. So this is less of a conspiracy theory and more just an observation you can make. The Pokemon Adventures manga is quite notorious for having a pretty messed up release schedule. This is because of the fact that it has to cover and advertise the latest Pokemon game at the time. And as you know, Pokemon releases a new game on average once per year. And back in the early days, you had strange release schedules for games. For example, Ruby and Sapphire releasing, then Fire Red and Leaf Green, and then Emerald. And the manga had to follow all of them, meaning multiple arcs would be running at the same time. This often results in the arcs being delayed, put on hiatus, and rushed to finish early. We saw an example of this with the Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon arc, where the ending was unsatisfied because it wrapped up too quickly and didn't resolve a lot of the plot points that the arc had introduced. Of course, this was because the author had to end the arc in order to start writing for Sword and Shield. The most infamous example of adventures scheduling issues is with the Black and White 2 arc. Black and White 2 released only 1 year before X and Y, which is already a tight time frame to fit an entire manga arc. On top of that, there were issues with the publisher that caused further delays. Additionally, the fact that Black and White 2 were a proper sequel to the brand new cast of characters rather than the usual third version meant that the manga had to basically introduce a bunch of new characters and include an entirely new story, further contributing to the arc's time issues. Eventually, the arc did go on hiatus in order to start working on the XY manga, and Black and White 2 wouldn't even return until the Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire arc concluded in 2016. However, the arc would once again go on hiatus due to some behind-the-scenes issues, and would return years later and finally conclude in 2020, 7 years after its initial publication. However, despite the delays, fans of the manga did think it was worth it to get a proper ending to the story. So yeah, while it is unfortunate that the Pokemon Company prioritizes just the manga releasing over the manga having a good comprehensive story, it is better to just delay the arcs rather than rush them. Although I don't think the manga should even be in this situation in the first place. Rose-themed chanting. Chairman Rose is the main villain of the story of Sword and Shield, and while this is obvious from the first time he appears on screen, he is overall not a very menacing dude, with his dad bod and overall laid-back, aloof personality, which makes the fact that his battle theme is one of the most ominous and intimidating of any Pokemon villain theme absolutely hilarious. Like, we follow this guy around the whole game, watching him act like an absolute joker, and then when we actually battle him, the music sounds like we're fighting a fallen angel or something, with the dark instrumental and chanting. The chanting is what we're here for. What is the chorus singing? Well, some people think that it's English, and that the chanting is saying, "Go Rose, save everyone," or "Go Rose, save the people." However, others say that it's Latin chanting, and that they are actually saying "Ego Rosa Credo" or "Rosa Cedo Credo." Both roughly translate to "I believe in the rose," which in this context would mean "I believe in Rose." So which one do you think is the correct chant? Rosa Cedo Credo definitely sounds the closest, though I still think it's funny that they gave him Latin chanting for his battle, especially when he's so easy he can be swept by any fire type you have. Rose is a very contradictory character, like his whole goal is to awaken Eternatus and bring about an apocalyptic event to harness energy, because he believed that the world would run out of electricity in thousands of years. What is this logic? It makes no sense at all. You want to hear a real conspiracy theory? I think this aspect of Sword and Shield's story is bullshit because it was changed at the last second. I think the initial story of Sword and Shield still had Rose as the bad guy, but his motivations were different. Basically, his company, Macros Cosmos, are the ones controlling the Dynamax energy across Galar, but Rose knows that the energy comes from Eternatus, and continuing to harvest it would inevitably awaken Eternatus and bring about the Darkest Day. But he and the company hide this fact from the public so that they can still continue making money off of Dynamax energy. It's a perfect parallel to real-world energy companies using fossil fuels and contributing to climate change, which if left unchecked would lead to an apocalyptic event. Eternatus is basically the climate change Pokemon. However, I think Game Freak scrapped this because if they made Dynamax energy bad, that would mean Dynamaxing would need to stop after the events of the story in order to stay consistent with the story they set up, and they probably didn't want to restrict the player from using the core gimmick of the game, so they came up with this random story last minute. However, I think an easy fix could be that you add an extra storyline where you'll bring Dynamaxing back by looking for an alternative source, that source being Calyrex and its blue Dynamax. Calyrex's Dynamax energy could represent clean energy that doesn't harm the environment, which fits with Calyrex's title as the King of Bountiful Harvests. He is literally good for the environment. So yeah, there would be a short period between the defeat of Rose and the discovery of Calyrex where you couldn't use Dynamax, but after this hypothetical storyline, Dynamax and Gigantamax can be used again, except now all Dynamax Pokemon have the blue Dynamax because they're using Calyrex's clean Dynamax energy. I think I cooked here. Game Freak, please hire me. Soak inspired by anime. The move Soak has the effect of changing the opponent's type to water. The move's animation suggests that the move works by literally showering the opponent in a bunch of water. This theory states that this move is a nod to, and retroactively explains, the battle between Pikachu and Onix in episode 5 of the anime. Obviously, Onix is a ground type and thus can't be hit by Pikachu's electric type attacks. However, during the battle, the sprinkler system in the gym goes off, covering Onix in water. Then Pikachu's electric type attacks work against Onix since it's now wet, which is how Ash wins the battle. People used to call bullshit on this, saying that it was a plot armor moment, but years after, it's likely that Game Freak made the move Soak based on this moment from the anime. And by making the move, it explains how Pikachu was able to beat Onix. The sprinkler system covering it in water temporarily gave it the properties of a water type, giving it a weakness to electric. Now, the only thing Game Freak needs to do is distribute a special event Pikachu that knows the move Soak as a nod to this moment, and then this theory is confirmed. Rainbow Rocket Mewtwo is evil. Very simple theory. In the Rainbow Rocket episode, Giovanni uses a Mewtwo that he Mega Evolves. Mega Evolution requires a strong bond between the trainer and Pokemon, meaning that Giovanni has a strong bond with Mewtwo. If an intelligent Pokemon like Mewtwo has a strong bond with someone as evil as Giovanni, it likely means that Mewtwo itself is evil. Tailless Ponyta. When Galarian Ponyta was first revealed, we were shown two of them, one with a tail and one without a tail. Instantly, people started speculating as to why this was. The prevailing theory that almost everyone agreed on was that this was a gender difference. In fact, many people thought that this would surely lead to a split evolution based on gender. Some brave theorists dug even deeper, digging up an old Scottish poem named Shanter, where a horse gets its tail ripped off, and claimed that the tailless Ponyta must be referencing that. However, none of this speculation was true, because when Sword and Shield first released, people only found Ponyta with tails. The tailless Ponyta was nowhere to be found, because it turns out that one Ponyta not having a tail was a graphics error. Aura is infinity energy. Both aura and infinity energy have been described as the energy that is the essence of life forms, so many have theorized that they are both in fact one and the same, just different names. It could be that aura is just a traditional name for it, while infinity energy is the scientific name for it, or that different regions have different names for it. Another potential explanation could be that aura is what energy is called when it's in a living being, while infinity energy is what it's called when it's extracted, like a magma lava situation. Irizu is Silver's ancestor. Another theory about Silver's family, this time being about a potential ancestor in Legends Arceus. This theory is basically just an extension of the Silver and Mars are related theories that go back decades, considering both of them have similar red hair. Irizu is obviously Mars' ancestor, with the similar looks, sharing the same species of Pokemon, and the name connection, Aries and Mars. However, if we go off looks, she is also very similar to Silver, having the same colored hair and even hairstyle. And if we believe the theory that Ariana is Silver's mom, there's a name similarity, with both Irizu and Ariana having names that start with the letters A and R. Garchomp and Sharpedo. Another relative theory, but this time it's with Pokemon. Garchomp and Sharpedo, despite being a part of two completely different families in game, share a lot of similarities. They're both based on sharks, they both have the same color schemes of red, blue, and yellow, and they both even have a star-like yellow shape on their snout, as well as a back fin with a notch in it. They both also have the ability Rough Skin, though this is likely tied to the fact that both are inspired by sharks. They're so similar that if you said Garchomp was the third stage of Carvanha and Sharpedo, I think that non-Pokemon fans wouldn't see anything wrong with it. The theory here is that Garchomp and Sharpedo are related by evolution, not how evolution works in the games, but rather real life, where animals change over millions of years. I think sometime in the past, the Garchomp and Sharpedo lines had a common ancestor, perhaps a water dragon type. A branch of this common ancestor species broke off and started living on land, eventually turning into the Gible line and getting the ground dragon type. Meanwhile, those who stayed in the ocean became the Carvanha line, losing the dragon type and becoming a water dark type. I legitimately think that Garchomp's design is a nod to the Sharpedo line, and this theory is too good not to be true. Cherish Balls. So Cherish Balls are a special type of Pokeball that hold event distribution Pokemon. Since these external event distributions are the only way you can get them, and you can't obtain them at all through regular in-game methods, they are considered non-canon, not existing in the world itself. However, there's one small issue with this assumption. In Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, an ace trainer called Deanna actually uses a Cherish Ball. Thus, Cherish Balls are technically canon in-game, as an NPC uses them. But could this be a coding error or bug? After all, this is Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl we're talking about here. Well, actually not. You see, ace trainer Deanna sends out a Tropius in a Cherish Ball. This is a reference to the first ever event Pokemon that was distributed in a Cherish Ball, which was a Tropius, distributed in Japan in February of 2007. This distribution was the tie-in to the Japanese TV show Pokemon Sunday. One of the hosts of the show was named Shoko Nakagawa, and in Japan, the trainer with the premier ball Tropius is named Shoko, so a pretty cool Easter egg, really nice detail. But does it make the Cherish Ball canon in the lore? I don't think so, but don't lose hope yet. In Legends Arceus, we are introduced to the Origin Ball, a special, one-of-a-kind Pokeball made out of Origin Ore, which is extremely powerful, and used to capture either Dialga or Palkia. The Origin Ball is just the old version of the Cherish Ball, kind of like how the Ultra Ball had an old version in Legends Arceus. So I think that it's entirely possible that Cherish Balls exist in the Pokemon world's canon, and would just be modern versions of Origin Balls. But it's just that Origin Ore is so rare that it's near impossible to produce Cherish Balls. And after Silph made the Master Ball, there would be no reason to make a Cherish Ball anyway. No bodies in Lavender Tower. Lavender Tower is infamous for being a graveyard, with the assumption being that the graves in the tower hold bodies. However, in the Gen 2 games, Lavender Tower is converted to a radio tower, with all the actual cultural artifacts now being moved to Mr. Fuji's house. The fact that the tower was even converted into a commercial radio station in the first place is some evidence that there are no bodies, because if there were bodies buried in the tower itself, that would just be weird. So it's entirely possible the tower didn't actually contain any bodies, but rather just heirlooms or relics of past Pokemon partners that people could store there and return to mourn the Pokemon. Then, after the tower was taken over by the radio, those memorabilia were then shifted to Mr. Fuji's house, clearing out the tower. Rosa is tall. While there aren't any official heights for Pokemon characters, many people assume that Rosa, the female protagonist of Black and White 2, was on the shortest height. However, with the release of Pokemon Masters, we saw that she was actually giant, towering over Hilda, who many assumed would be taller than Rosa just due to design language. Some people calculated that Rosa may be over 6 feet tall, taller than all the other female Pokemon protagonists and even several of the male protagonists. Oh yeah, and also keep in mind Rosa is around 14 years old, meaning that she's still got around a year left of height growth in her. Rosa being tall quickly became a meme in the Pokemon Masters community, and it was all good fun. However, I wouldn't take this too seriously. It's entirely possible that the trailer footage here was just scaled or placed to models weirdly, as in the game itself it does seem like she's much shorter. But it's still fun to think that Rosa for some reason is just way taller than all the other player characters. Brandon is Paul's father. Paul is an anime-only rival character of Ash. As with many Pokemon characters, the identity of his father is a mystery. However, many people think that it's the Pyramid King Brandon. There is a bit of evidence to back this up. First of all, they just look very similar. Second of all, Paul's character revolves around strength at any cost, and he adopted this ideology because his older brother was beaten by Brandon, so he made it his goal to beat Brandon. This storyline does get more oomph if Brandon is Paul's dad. Additionally, as a Pyramid King, Brandon does use the best of the best Pokemon, often competitively trained. In the games, if you want to beat him, you'd have the best chance of doing so if you use specially bred and trained Pokemon, rather than just a casual team. And in the anime, Paul is almost representative of real-world competitive Pokemon players, who don't really play the game to bond with Pokemon, but rather to only train them to be competitively viable. Paul abandoning Pokemon who he deems as weak is similar to how competitive players release Pokemon that don't have the best IVs or nature. Also, Brandon is strongly connected with the Regis, using Regirock, Regice, and Registeel on his team, as well as befriending Regigigas. So he does have a strong love for the Regis. And what is Paul's older brother's name? Reggie. Exactly a name someone like Brandon would give to their son. However, what makes me hesitate on this theory is that Brandon and Paul do interact a lot within the anime, and nothing about their behavior or dialogue suggests that they are father and son, which you would think would be something that would come up, but this is still a really fun headcanon. Fire Red and Leaf Green Rocket Executives. In the post-game of Fire Red and Leaf Green, you fight some of the remnants of Team Rocket who have taken over a warehouse. There are two of them, one female and one male, the man acting as the de facto new leader of Team Rocket. While they aren't giving names, it's very clear that these two are Team Rocket executives Ariana and Archer. They share the same ace Pokemon, with the woman having a Vileplume and the man having a Houndoom. And I mean, Bulbapedia just says that these two executives are Ariana and Archer. It's nice to bridge the gap between the Gen 1 and 2 games a bit here. Manga exists in anime. In the anime episode Lights Camera Up to Action, we see a brief clip of a movie playing. This movie seems to feature characters from the Pocket Monsters manga, having a similar design for Red, as well as Clefairy and Pikachu. A fun Easter egg, but it also insinuates that the Pocket Monsters manga, or at least its characters, are a fictional story in the universe of the anime. Iono and Miriam. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet feature many characters who are related to each other, or with characters from other games in the franchise. But one many have overlooked is the gym leader Iono and nurse Miriam. The only evidence for the supposed theory is that they have similar hair color. While hair color has been an indication of familial relationships within Pokemon, without any further evidence, this theory has been rightly ridiculed. Except that may not be the full answer. There could be further evidence, as there are a bunch of people online saying that dialogue exists in the game from Miriam saying that Iono is her older sister. However, I looked through the Bulbapedia dialogue pages for both Miriam and Iono, and there's nothing close to this. And as someone who's played through the full game as well as the DLC, I don't remember anything like this either. Additionally, they don't have special interactions in the Indigo Disc DLC, which you assume they would if they were meant to be related. However, the more I dig into this, the more people I see saying online that they read that Iono and Miriam are sisters through in-game dialogue. Can anybody actually confirm or deny the existence of this dialogue? I didn't expect this entry to become such a rabbit hole. Gold Sudowoodo. In the anime, there's an episode where Sudowoodo enters a machine and gets covered in gold plating. Its trainer did this because the Sudowoodo was afraid of water and thought that making it gold would help with this fear. However, it backfired and the Sudowoodo didn't like it. The episode revolved around catching the Sudowoodo again and bringing it back to the machine to revert the change. Now, what exactly is this machine? I would say that it could have been some weird form of terrestrialization, but there's no Terra type that would give it a metallic coating and a resistance to water, especially a golden one. It definitely seems like some sort of hardened armor that removes weakness. So maybe if there is some weird future gimmick that gives Pokemon armor to remove all weaknesses from them, then people would point at this episode and say that it was foreshadowing. But ultimately, I think this episode was just a reference to Shiny Sudowoodo, and the anime writers just came up with a plot surrounding a golden Sudowoodo without really caring about game canon, as they usually do. Ore is Arizona. Yes, the creators of Pokemon Colosseum and XD have stated that Ore, the region the games take place in, is based on Arizona, specifically Phoenix, Arizona. While on its own, this is just a fun fact, it does raise some interesting implications for the greater Pokemon world. We know that regions usually parallel their real-world locations in physical geographical location, so we can assume that there's an alternate United States of America in the Pokemon world. We've seen an explicit version of this with Unova, based on New York City and its surrounding areas. So it's entirely possible that Ore and Unova are on the same continent, though if they are separated like how New York and Arizona are separated in real life, they're nowhere near each other. Though I would like to see more regions based on the United States of America, the West Coast states of California, Oregon, and Washington are a no-brainer and lend themselves perfectly to a Pokemon region. And even the southern states between Texas and Florida contain some pretty unique and varied cultures and geography, which would be cool to see in Pokemon. And man, give us a proper northeastern region with a lot of gloomy Lovecraftian influence. Most of you guys watching this are American, so let me know if you want to see your state become a region. And even if you live outside the US, let us know how you think your country could be a good Pokemon region. Ash's Pikachu and Detective Pikachu. In the Detective Pikachu game, there's a cutscene where Tim and Detective Pikachu encounter another Pikachu. Detective Pikachu talks to this unnamed Pikachu, and while we can't understand the Pikachu, based on what the detective is responding, we can figure out that this is actually Ash's Pikachu, specifically the line, "Tell your buddy to be the very best like no one ever was." So what was Ash doing in Rhyme City? Well, it doesn't really matter, and it's not too far-fetched that in his journey across the world he would stop by in Rhyme City for a couple days. Just a fun tie-in. Shadow Pokemon Universe. Shadow Pokemon appear in Colosseum, Gale of Darkness, Pokken Tournament, and technically Pokemon Go, and all have similar effects and coloration applied to them, implying that all these games take place in the same universe or timeline, since Shadow Pokemon are never referenced in the main series games. So if you're a real stickler for the details and want to include basically all Pokemon media in a timeline, you have to also consider a Shadow and non-Shadow timeline. But nobody's crazy enough to try and do that, right? Right? Fungus-inspired Pokeball. In Pokemon Scarlet's dex entry for Fungus, it is mentioned that the inventor of the modern-day Pokeball was a fan of Fungus, and thus designed it after Fungus. However, it does also mention that this was a rumor, and that there is reason to be skeptical of this story. Many earlier dex entries of Fungus say that they don't know why it resembles a Pokeball, implying that the opposite could be true. If we think about Fungus within its ecosystem, the fact that it resembles a Pokeball seems to be a sort of hunting mechanism. As people or Pokemon see it, think of it as a Pokeball, and go close and try and pick it up or interact with it, which is when Fungus releases its poisonous spores. So it's not like the Pokeball pattern is just a random coincidence, it is specifically modeled as a mimic of the Pokemon item, meaning that the Pokeball likely came first. Additionally, the fact that Hisuian Voltorb exists and seems to be the origin of the red and white design of the Apricorn balls of Legends Arceus, which of course was before modern Pokeballs, seems to put the final nail in the coffin of the theory that Fungus inspired the Pokeball. Advanced Generations Episode 101. Many people are aware of Episode 38 of the anime Electric Soldier Porygon, which was banned worldwide due to causing seizures, and is also the cause of Porygon not showing up at all in the anime ever since. However, there is another episode of the anime that has been banned worldwide, Advanced Generation Episode 101. This episode was actually never aired at all since it heavily featured earthquakes, and before this episode was supposed to air, Japan was hit by a pretty strong earthquake, so they pulled this episode before release to avoid that sensitive subject. To avoid situations like this again, the anime would actually ban all use of the moves Earthquake, Fissure, and Magnitude going forward. This episode is lost media, though there was a preview that briefly aired for it before that itself was pulled, which contained footage from the episode. However, this preview was also, itself, lost. Alistair is a mask. Alistair is a gym leader in Galar who always wears a mask and never takes it off in public. According to the game, he gained the ability to see ghosts after an accident he had when he was only 4 years old, but keeps details about this accident a mystery. Now, we can extrapolate what happened here. The accident caused Alistair to die when he was 4, which is why he gained the ability to see ghosts. He himself is a ghost. Additionally, we know about a ghost-type Pokemon that has connections with masks, Yamask. The masks that Yamask carry are supposedly what they looked like as humans before they died. So it's possible that Alistair is a mask that took this one step further, not only wearing a mask but also possessing its former corpse. Well, maybe, but in his rare league card, we do see him unmasked, and he does seem like just a normal healthy child, so no ghostly attributes here. It is said that he does wear the mask to cope with his severe social anxiety, which just makes his character go from a fictional horror to a very real one. Lava Dome Pokemon. In Pokemon X and Y, there's an NPC in Lumio City that says, "I hear that there's a Lava Dome Pokemon in Jaun Plaza." Of course, the Lava Dome Pokemon is Heatran, which is usually found in volcanoes, so it's a bit strange that people are supposedly hearing that it's in the middle of a busy city plaza. While you may be expecting some crazy Easter egg or super obscure lore, unfortunately this is another mistranslation from Japanese to English. The girl this NPC is talking to mimics Pokemon cries, and in the original Japanese, what she says is along the lines of, "Wow, your cry is so good it sounds like the Lava Dome Pokemon is actually in Jaun Plaza," complimenting her mimicry of Heatran. So unfortunately a pretty mundane explanation, though I will say if X and Y had come out before the internet was widespread, there would 100% be so many theories, speculation, and rumors about how there's some super secret way to find Heatran in Lumio City. It would be Mew under the truck all over again. Though my favorite explanation for this dialogue comes from the theory that those girls were actually talking about Trevor, one of the Gen 6 rivals. Trevor actually lives in a house near Jaun Plaza, so somebody said that the NPC saying a Lava Dome Pokemon was in the plaza was basically her just roasting Trevor's giant orange bowl cut. This explanation is so funny that going forward, I'm gonna treat it as canon. So that is layer 4 of the Pokemon Conspiracy Iceberg. Thank you guys for watching. I know you waited quite a bit for this one. Now that the Fortnite Iceberg is over with, I'm going to go full speed ahead on this series. It will be the #1 priority of this channel until it's finished. I would appreciate if you like, comment, and subscribe, and if you want to go the extra mile in supporting me, I do have a Patreon or YouTube membership that you could subscribe to. But as always, I appreciate you guys for taking the time to enjoy my content. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.